Greetings, everyone. It is the Sabbath on April 18th, and we're in Matthew 12 and verse 38. And there's a lot here um, in a small area. So we're going to talk about a number of things. And really, really, really important, this section, because uh, it sets up expectations for the behavior of God's people in the end time. And there is little that you can truly understand if you think you're going to get a sign in the end time, uh, prior to the fall of Babylon. So let's go ahead and start in Matthew 12:38. Then certain of the scribes and of the Pharisees answered, saying, Master, we would see a sign from you. So let's set the stage first. First, you have the Messiah, who's there. Obviously, that's known. The next most important thing is who is talking. So the Messiah and the scribes and Pharisees. Who are the scribes and Pharisees? The scribes and Pharisees were the leaders of the churches of that time. So analogously, you would be talking to the ministers of the various churches of God in this time. And the people who are looking for a sign in this case are looking for something to criticize. So these people, the scribes and the Pharisees, had their own answers to everything. They were the bosses of religion of that time. And the Messiah was an upstart. The Messiah was someone who came in from sideways and was doing all these things that they couldn't deny. Healing someone who has this horrible disease, and they are just suddenly healed, and somebody who can't walk and suddenly they can walk, somebody who's blind from birth and suddenly they can see. And this whole circumstance put them extraordinarily out of sorts, because the authority did not come from their power source. Their own source of power is their organization and where they reside in their little community. And the Messiah was coming completely out from the side, and they were trying to destroy him. Really, in the end, they were trying to destroy him. There's a word I'm searching for, it's not coming to me, but they were trying to get rid of him. And when they did that, they almost always asked questions or things to trip him up. And when you consider all the signs that are in the Bible, and there are a lot of them, most of them were a lot of the things that he was doing at the time. So he would heal people, he would he would cast out demons, he would do all of these various things, which are signs. Now, there's another order, a whole order of signs, like Elijah, when he called down fire from heaven to burn up the sacrifices, after he poured water on them 3 times and did all the various things that he did. There are other kinds of signs. And there are times when God killed people, just flat out killed 50 men right in front of Elijah. And there are times when he did various other things which were considered signs. What is a sign? You need to know what a sign is. A sign is a miracle. A sign is a miracle. Broadest sense, it's a miracle that everyone can see. So when you find people looking for signs, what are they looking for? This is really, really important that you understand why people ask for signs and what comes out of you when you look for a sign. What is a sign to you? To some people, it might be one thing. To some people, it might be another thing. Some people want to see God. To some people, seeing a strange shadow that looks kind of like the Virgin Mary is a sign in some advertising sign or whatever. You have to know what is a sign to you before you know whether you have sin relating to this. The scribes and the Pharisees were asking to see a sign. They were asking to see a miracle on demand. I don't know where you're from, but where I'm from, if you demand a sign from God, the sign you get might not be necessarily a good thing. So consider very, very carefully before you go anywhere with signs and with wonders and things like that, because they can take you off in a direction you don't want to go very, very easily. But what is the real reason people want signs, regardless of who they are, whether they're the blind leading the blind or just randomly somebody? Why do people want to see signs? It's really easy. There's one word. It's called reassurance. They want to be assured that everything is okay. They want to be assured that their view of everything is correct. And if they see the right sign, then they know they're in good shape with God. That's how they know. That's why everybody wants to see a sign, because they want to know for sure that they're on God's good side. There's not really any other major reason to see a sign except to be reassured that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. You got to kind of step back and think about it for a minute. You're asking God to perform like a monkey so that you feel better about yourself. Personally, I'm not going there. It's not happening. I don't need to see a sign from God. You know why I don't need to see a sign from God? Because God's given us everything we need. Blessed are they who believe, not having seen the signs and miracles. Blessed are they who believe, not having seen. How do we believe, not having seen? We haven't seen any miracles. Why should we believe this? It's because you can recognize the truth. If you can recognize the truth when you hear it, if you understand why God's doing all the things he's doing, if you know who God is and why he's been trying to talk to us for thousands of years, you don't need a sign, because you know who he is and what he's doing and why he's doing it. You don't need to prove to yourself that you're doing okay. You know you're not. You know you're a sinner. You know you have all kinds of problems and that you need to improve. You see, it's not the people who know that they're sinners that need a sign. It's the people who think they're doing all right. It's the people who think they're doing righteously when they're not that want a sign. People who know they're sinners, they don't need a sign. They know their problems. They know what they have to overcome. But people that have been told that they're doing just fine and that everything's okay and that they've been doing what they should be doing. You're in our church, of course, you should be doing what you're doing. Those people need a sign. They need reassurance badly because they're aware of the flaws. Subconsciously and sometimes consciously, they're aware of the flaws in their thinking. They're aware of the problems that they've ignored regarding God and regarding the things around them. They're aware, sometimes, mostly subconsciously, that they're sinners for real. But they've convinced themselves, and other people have convinced them, that they're all right. And that's where the whole hypocrisy thing comes in. You see, it's the hypocrites, the blind, and the leaders of the blind that need a sign. Why do the blind need a sign? Because they can't see. If you can't see what's going on in the end time, you want a sign. You need a sign. Are we on the right path? Are we doing what we're supposed to? We've been doing everything they've said. The ministers told us all of this and all of that and all of the other thing. But wait a minute. I look around and there's 100,000 different churches. And they all have different doctrines. And they're all saying different things. Contradictory, backwards, sideways, all over the place. I need a sign that we're doing it right and we're not the ones that are going to get killed. You see, that's why people need a sign. Because they're hypocrites. Hypocrites require signs. They require constant maintenance with words. Oh, everything's okay. It's just fine. Well, you've got to be better at this. And there's always going to be some of that. There's always a problem you've got to lightly confront. But really, you're a righteous person. You just got to fix a couple of these little things. Well, let's get your Christian living down to where you can exist perfectly in this situation you're in now. You can exist perfectly here for a long time. Denying the words of our Messiah, denying his testimony. Because the testimony of Jesus Christ is the spirit of prophecy. And when all you've got is false prophecy, you're in trouble. You're in trouble in a big way. So when you see the scribes and the Pharisees talking to him, these are the hypocrites. These are the ministry of the day. Hypocrites asking to see a sign, looking for a way to discredit the Messiah in some fashion. And what did the Messiah do? He declined to be the monkey that was just parroting some sign back to them. He declined. But he answered and said unto them, an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and there shall no sign be given it, but the sign of Jonah the prophet. An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign. We know that whenever you see that word generation, it's really, really important. Because you're talking about the last generation. This is a prophecy from the Messiah about the last generation that's going to truly exist in its normal form before the beast power comes, before Babylon is destroyed. And when you look at this and you see an evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, most people are like, okay. Wicked and adulterous, another location says the same thing. What it really means is a bunch of sinners and sexually immoral people seek after a sign. You see, the hypocrites consider themselves to be sin-free. And when God looks at it, God's like, wow, these are the worst sinners ever. I'm going to kill them. And that's what he's talking about right there. The sexually amoral is really important too, because guess what? That's us in this generation. The sexually immoral. There has never been a generation as sexually immoral as this generation. This last generation before the destruction of America. No society on the planet has ever been as bad as we are. People talk about the Romans, the Greeks, and they weren't even close. They weren't even close. Some of the rich people were as bad as we are right now. But it's everybody now. And it's a problem. Because if you have this much sin, see that adulterous thing there, that sexually immoral generation, that's God pointing at us, like directly saying, this is who I'm talking to. This is who I'm talking to. They weren't particularly any more immoral in Jerusalem in the New Testament times than any other time in the past. They were so much better than us at that time when the Messiah was standing there that it's not even funny. And we're a pit of despair now. This is who he was talking to. There's also something else going on here. He said, you're not going to get a sign except for the sign of Jonah the prophet. He demurred, to use an old word. He said, no, I'm not going to give you a sign. And I'm not actually going to tell you what the punchline is, particularly, except it's the sign of Jonah the prophet. And then he says, for as Jonah was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man be 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And we see very clearly that the Son of Man here is referring to the Messiah, and that he died and was there for 3 days and 3 nights. Well, prophecy fulfilled. It's all over us. Don't need anything else. Really? And yet, we still don't have the latter harvest. Everything hasn't ended. God hasn't finished everything on this planet. And this still has to be finished. But he told us something really, really important about this 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the fish. That was the important thing. When you look at everything else about Jonah, there's a lot there, a lot to be said, a lot of interesting things. What was the sign of Jonah the prophet? 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the beast, the belly of a whale. For the Messiah, it was 3 days and 3 nights in death in the grave. In the end time, it's back to what Jonah was talking about. 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the beast. 42 months in the belly of the beast. That's what the sign of Jonah the prophet is. Read in Revelation, it's really clear. The outer court, which is measured by the first of the 2 witnesses. The inner court is measured by the first of the 2 witnesses, and the outer court is left out because it's going to be trodden underfoot for 42 months in the belly of the beast. If you haven't guessed yet, that's about 3 years. You see, we're coming up to the big harvest, the latter harvest, when most of the work that God's been doing on this planet is going to come to fruition. And when you talk about a generation that seeks after a sign, a wicked, wicked, evil, sinful generation, full of sexual problems and misconduct, that's our generation. That's this one here, right before America dies. Before Babylon the Great falls to the beast. Everybody knows this is going to happen. Everybody knows this is going to happen. The beast rules the entire planet for 42 months. If you can't figure that out from what it says in Revelation in really just kind of a heartbeat, you should be able to figure that out in minutes. You know that America has to die. And if you look in Daniel 2, you see, well, they could figure out that Babylon was Rome, and Babylon was Greece, and Babylon was the Medes and the Persians, and Babylon was the original Babylon, and there's 5 Babylons, and there's still one there, and they didn't say who that was. We just know that it's a military, political nation that rules the whole earth. Oh. And yet the beast has to do the same thing. He's got to rule the whole earth. You think Babylon and the beast are the same thing? Can't tell you how many people think that. I personally can't even conceive of why anybody would ever even go there. But there are a lot of people think that America's the beast, which is an absolute joke. The beast rules by the power of 10 nations. In 1 hour, it comes into power and takes over the whole world. That's not the story of America. I listen to this and I think, what is wrong with your brains that you can't even think? And it's because people don't use logic around God. Oh, there's no logic where God's concerned. And it just blows my mind. Everything that God does is 100% logical, more logical than anything men could ever do. It's just that your perspective is so far from God's that you can't understand him. Your perspective is so far off that you think evil is good and good is evil. And that it's okay to be sexually immoral and do whatever you want. It's not okay. And it's not going to work. You see, the sign of Jonah is almost useless to Jonah before he gets eaten. It's almost useless to the people who are going to go into the belly of the beast for 42 months. Because until you experience that, it's not terribly useful. You see, a sign happens in a moment. Whatever moment, it might be a long moment or a short moment, but it happens in a moment. If you're healed and given your sight, suddenly you can see. And that miracle exposes itself by the effect it has on the people in the miracle and seeing the miracle. So a sign that happens after the fact is kind of useless to most people. Well, that didn't help at all. That didn't reassure me at all. You see, they were looking for a sign. They were looking for reassurance. They were also looking for a way to discredit the Messiah. But people want a sign. And those guys, they were no different. They wanted to see a sign. They were looking for a way to get around it, around the Messiah, but they were also looking for a sign. You see, blind people, regardless of whether they're the leaders of the blind or not, still want to see a sign. When you're blind, you want to see a great light right in your face. And so they were looking. I don't know what these particular men were feeling or thinking at the time that they were doing it. God doesn't say. Maybe they were sort of earnest about it. Maybe they were just mostly trying to find a way to discredit the Messiah. Maybe they were partially looking for a sign so that they could change themselves a little bit. There's no way to tell. But what you do know is that they were asking amiss. They were asking for reassurance when no reassurance could be given. They were asking God to be a monkey for them, to reassure them, instead of their own faith being engaged. You see, your faith has got to be engaged with God at all times. Faith's important. Faith is how God knows that you are who he wants you to be. You see, somebody with faith will behave differently than somebody without faith. They'll behave differently. And you'll see their works. People who are faithful, their works will be different than somebody who is faithless. Their behavior will be different. And God notes all those differences. Go read Hebrews 11. What are all the differences? Their behavior was strange compared to people who are faithless. Their behavior was illogical compared to people who are faithless. If you're looking at it from a faithless perspective, God's perfectly logical. But you have to see it from his angle for it to make sense. And if you're 240 degrees to the side, you're not going to see it the same way. You're just not going to see it. Jonah was pretty cool. When I think about Jonah, I think, wow, Jonah. We're going to go over to Jonah really quick. Whoops. Jonah. And we're going to read some of this. I don't usually skip to different scriptures, but I'm going to read some of this because of how powerful and how important this particular passage is to us. And if you don't realize what your own behavior is when you look for a sign, then you're going to go the wrong direction. You see, a sign isn't where it's at. Blessed are they who believe not having seen. Your faith is what will separate you from the goats and the chaff, not anything else. Your faith and your belief in God. Your behavior has to be different based upon your faith. How many people changed their behavior after they saw a sign? In the account of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, how many people changed their behavior, truly changed their behavior after seeing a sign? It was actually quite a lot. It just wasn't that many percentage-wise. There were people whose belief was strengthened by seeing signs and wonders. But if you didn't have any faith, it didn't help you at all. Or if you thought you were doing just fine, it didn't help you. Christ came to bring sinners to repentance, not the righteous. And if you think you're righteous, which nobody will admit to, but most people think that way. In the churches of God, most people think that way. They just won't admit it. How do you know that? It's really easy. They keep doing what they're doing. And there's 100,000 different churches out there with all kinds of different doctrines that are all garbage. And they keep doing the same thing. So you know that they think they're doing all right. Otherwise, they would change that. Otherwise, they'd be like, no, whoa, hey, whoa, we can't do this. But they're still doing the same thing. So you know they're as self-righteous as anybody ever was. Wow, that hurts. Oof, that smarts. It does. Because we haven't gotten the point of everything God's been trying to teach us. What has he been trying to teach us? We learn all this stuff in these churches. What are we learning? Who God is. That's what you're supposed to learn in church. Who God is. And yet we have 100,000 millions, if you take each individual perspective, different views of who God is. And they're all widely varying with all kinds of different doctrines, all kinds of different beliefs. People got all kinds of strange ideas about who God is. And we haven't learned our lesson. All the lessons that God gave us. All he's been trying to do is teach us who he is the entire time, and we've just ignored it. And then we want a sign telling us that we're doing it right. And God says, not hardly. Not hardly. The end time, you ain't getting a sign at all. At least not until the destruction of America. The destruction of America actually is a sign when it comes right down to it. But again, it's not terribly useful because it happens too late for the people who are inside. Unless they have faith and believe who God is prior. Just like the sign of Jonah the prophet. The beginning of the sign of Jonah the prophet is the destruction of America and then being hauled off for 42 months into the belly of the beast, where it's not much fun being digested. And that's what happened to Jonah. He got digested for 3 days. When you're in the belly of a beast, guess what? There's stomach acid in there. You've all erped a little hydrochloric acid. How'd you like that in your eyes? Not much fun. How do you even breathe in there? You see, it's a miracle. Staying alive for 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of a beast is a miracle. It's just not one that we want to get involved in. Let's read Jonah 1, verse 1. Now the word of the Lord came unto Jonah, the son of Amittai, saying, Arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and cry against it, for their wickedness has come up before me. And then suddenly, but Jonah rose up to flee. And most people don't get this. Jonah was a prophet of God. Jonah knew a lot. Jonah knew a lot more than we think that he did. He knew a lot. Going into this, he knew way more than we think or we see in this story. You see, Jonah was a prophet of God, and he got up and ran. And you got to ask yourself for a second, why? Why did Jonah run? Was he scared? Not particularly. He knew who God was. He wasn't running because he was scared of God. I mean, he was afraid of God, but not in this particular instance. You see, what Jonah didn't like at all is that God was sending him to his worst enemies. He didn't like that. He didn't want to be involved in that process. He was trying to be loyal to his own people. You see, most of the time, God sends prophets to his own people. List all the prophets. How many of them got sent somewhere else? Not many. And even the ones who did get sent to somewhere else, guess what? Their primary job was to talk to Israel. Jeremiah, perfect example. He went off and talked to all kinds of people, but guess what? Primarily, he was talking to God's people. Jonah got a job, and he's like, no! It was the worst thing he could possibly imagine. I have to go and talk to these people of the great city of Nineveh. God's going to do a work in Nineveh. And Jonah's like, nope. No, please, no, God, don't do this to me. So he ran away. But Jonah rose up to flee into Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. He's like, I'm running away from God because I don't want to do this. And went down to Joppa, and he found a ship going to Tarshish. So he paid the fare thereof and went down into it to go with them unto Tarshish from the presence of the Lord. It's like, he knew what he was doing. He had a clear picture of everything that was going on. As soon as God said that, he was like, arg. But God had different ideas. He's like, no, you're not going to get away with this. God knew what Jonah was going to do from the beginning. He knew who Jonah was. He had a perfect idea of what Jonah's faith was and how Jonah was going to interact with him in this interaction. He knew Jonah completely. And he recorded this story for us so that we could see it in living color. And for me, it's very amusing because of Jonah's knowledge of God was so great that he was able to actually run away from God in a meaningfully unmeaningful way that it's actually pretty hilarious when you look at it and you actually understand what was going on. And God said, no. But the Lord sent out a great wind into the sea, and there was a mighty tempest in the sea, so that the ship was like to be broken. And all the sailors were afraid. They're like, we're going to die. Then the mariners were afraid and cried every man unto his God and cast forth the wares that were in the ship into the sea to lighten it of them. But Jonah was gone down into the sides of the ship, and he lay and was fast asleep. Okay. What other example do we have in the Bible of someone who was lying in a ship asleep, not worrying in the slightest that the ship was going to sink? Oh, that was the Messiah. He said, all right, be calm out there. And it got calm. Messiah was lying there asleep in the bottom of the boat, not caring. What was Jonah doing? He was fast asleep at the bottom of the boat. He knew he wasn't going to die. His faith was great enough that he didn't care whether there were some waves or some winds. And it was enough that he literally did not care whether he died or whether he lived. He was aware that God was interacting with him, and he knew, deep down in his guts, he knew that God was going to deal with this circumstance. And he was okay. If that was death in the water, then he was okay with that. He wasn't worried about it. I've been on boats in 35, 40-foot seas. Most people can't sleep. Most people can't sleep. Most people have white knuckle, holding on to something, trying not to puke. Jonah was asleep. The Messiah was asleep. Same circumstance. Both of them were quite content in their circumstance. But the people around them, not so much. So the shipmaster came unto him and said unto him, What do you mean, oh you sleeper? What are you doing? This is not logical behavior. Arise, call upon your God, if so be that God will think upon us, that we perish not. They were desperate. They were looking for some God that would answer them. They were looking for a sign. Jonah's like, really, did you have to wake me up? And they said, everyone to his fellow, come and let us cast lots that we may know for whose cause this evil is upon us. So they cast lots, and the lot fell upon Jonah. This brings up an entirely separate subject that's interesting. To me, it's interesting. How do you know that when you cast lots, it's the truth or it's not the truth? This is a bunch of sailors. This is a bunch of pagans from all kinds of different religions, and they cast lots, and it fell on Jonah. A miracle in and of itself. There are lots of other places in the Bible that lots are recorded, and it was a typical thing to do in and around the tabernacle and the temple. Happened a lot. When Moses was around, when all kinds of things were going on. I think it's interesting. I think it's really interesting. Extraordinary in some respects. Something that would cause hysteria in quantum theory if people actually understood it. But we don't need to go into that any further. The lot fell upon Jonah. God made the miracle. Sort of miracle. Sort of miracle. And then they said unto him, tell us, we pray you, for whose cause this evil is upon us. They didn't have any doubts. As soon as the lot fell on him, they knew. How did they know? Well, there were a couple clues. He was fast asleep and didn't care. But also back then, lots worked properly. And now they sort of don't. For whose cause is this evil upon us? What is your occupation? And where do you come from? And what is your country? And what people are you? And if you stop and you look at these questions for a minute, there's a lot of reasons for those questions. A lot of reasons for those questions. It's kind of important. What was his occupation? Oh, I'm a prophet. I'm a prophet. And where are you from? Israel. Israel. And you're of those people of God from Israel? You see, back then it made a difference where you were from. Still makes one now. It's just obscured by darkness and time. But a prophet of Israel was something everybody knew about. Everybody knew about that all over the Levant and all the way around Mesopotamia. Everybody knew about prophets of Israel. Everybody knew about Moses, children of Israel coming out of Egypt and all the different things that happened. They knew about Abraham. They knew about everybody. And they knew all this stuff. And they knew when things were true and when they weren't. They had all kinds of gods and all kinds of problems, but they knew the history of Israel. To them, it was kind of, oh, that's the Israelites. And yeah, they've got a God that's pretty powerful. And whew, we're not messing with him. We got our own gods and we'll do what we want over here. And he said unto them, I am an Hebrew, and I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, which made the sea and the dry land. I'm a Hebrew. I'm like Abraham and Moses and all these other guys. And I fear the Lord, the God of heaven, which made the sea and the dry land. Then were the men exceedingly afraid, because they knew who the God of Israel was by reputation. And said unto him, why have you done this? For the men knew that he fled from the presence of the Lord, because he had told them. Well, I kind of ran away from God because I didn't really want to do what he wanted me to do. And they're like, Why? Why did you get on our boat? Then they said unto me, unto him, what shall we do unto you that the sea may be calm unto us? For the sea wrought and was tempestuous. Sorry. Sea was angry, big waves and lots of wind, scary. At what point here do you see Jonah being afraid? Jonah wasn't afraid. Jonah knew who God was. Most people who read Jonah don't recognize that Jonah knew exactly what was going on. And he said unto them, take me up and cast me forth into the sea. So shall the sea be calm unto you, for I know that for my sake this great tempest is upon you. The storm's because of me. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have done that. So just throw me in the ocean. Faith beyond what we can imagine from most people. When the Messiah was in the same circumstance, who got out of the boat? The Messiah did. Voluntarily got out of the boat. Jonah voluntarily got out of the boat. Peter, yeah, sort of voluntarily, under duress, and then he sank. But he had faith. Not like Jonah did, not like the Messiah did, but Peter had faith. Nobody else got out of the boat except for Peter. But Jonah was fine with it. He's like, well, just pitch me over the side. How many people tell you to pitch them over the side in the middle of a big storm at sea? Nobody. It's not logical. Jonah was cool. I love this story of Jonah. It's beautiful. He said unto them, take me up and cast me forth into the sea. So shall the sea be calm unto you. For I know that for my sake this great tempest is upon you. Nevertheless, the guys were like, well, we're not going to murder this guy. We're not going to murder this guy. We throw him over and he's dead. Isn't that obvious? Jonah knew he wasn't going to die there. Or if he did, he was fine with it. If God kills me, God will kill me. I have disobeyed him. I deserve it. Nevertheless, the men rowed hard to bring it to land. But they could not, for the sea wrought against them, fought them. But they could not, for the sea was angry and tempestuous against them. Wherefore they cried unto the Lord and said, we beseech you, O Lord, we beseech you, let us not perish for this man's life, and lay not upon us innocent blood, for you, O Lord, have done as it pleased you. You've done what you wanted, and we don't think we need to die just because of this guy who disobeyed you. So they took up Jonah, cast him forth into the sea, and the sea ceased from her raging. They did what the Messiah did what they asked him to, or sort of. I'm not phrasing it right, but he just said, "Be calm," in the sea and everything, and they were like, "Whoa!" And Jonah kind of did the same thing. He's like, "Well, just pitch me into the ocean, and this will stop." The parallels are pretty strong. It's pretty funny. And the sea ceased from raging. Then the men feared the Lord exceedingly and offered a sacrifice unto the Lord and made vows. And whether they kept their vows or not is a question. Find out in the kingdom. Now the Lord had prepared a great fish to swallow up Jonah, and Jonah was in the belly of the fish 3 days and 3 nights. More or less 42 months, depending upon what the calendar is that year. 12 or 13 month year. And thus the sign of Jonah the prophet. People try and go all kinds of different directions. The sign of Jonah the prophet was being in the belly of a fish for 3 days and 3 nights. Then Jonah prayed unto the Lord, his God, out of the fish's belly. Jonah's like, okay, you got me. Now I'm willing to talk. And what does he say? And I cried by reason of my affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me out of the belly of hell, cried I, and you heard my voice. Because let's face it, it's not really a picnic when you're in the belly of a whale being slowly digested. What do whales eat typically? Krill, fish. They digest protein. That's what they do. For you had cast me into the deep in the midst of the seas, and the floods compassed me about. All your billows and your waves passed over me. It was rough. Seas were horrible. Everything was rough. And yet he was asleep. Then said I am cast out of your sight, yet I will look again toward your holy temple. He knew he disobeyed. He was clear on that whole thing. Jonah was in a snit. Really, he was in a snit. He had a bad attitude. Still in all, his faith was greater than most would give him credit for. Yet will I again look toward thy holy temple. The waters compassed me about, even to the soul. The depth closed round about me, and the weeds were wrapped about my head. He was in the guts of this whale, and apparently there was some greenery in there. I went down to the bottoms of the mountains. The earth with her bars was about me forever. Yet have you brought up my life from corruption, O Lord my God. I did this to myself, and you're saving me in this extraordinary way. I'm still alive, even though I was in the worst storm ever, and now I'm in the belly of this fish, being slowly digested, and yet you've kept me alive. When my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord, and my prayer came in unto thee into your holy temple. Where do prayers go? They're the incense, the smoke rising before God. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. If you don't understand that sentence right there alone, you should spend a few weeks studying about that particular idea. I'm not going to go into that now, though. We can do that some other time. But I will sacrifice unto you with the voice of thanksgiving, and I will pay that I have vowed. Salvation is of the Lord. Three days and 3 nights of the most vicious introspection. Has anyone ever been as introspective as Jonah was? I have my doubts. Maybe the Messiah when he was sweating blood, but when you are being slowly digested for 3 days and 3 nights, you're bound to have a few introspective moments. What am I about? What am I doing? What am I? And these verses explain what he came to. The wisdom of Solomon and David and everybody else who ever thought about God. It comes to the point where you realize you've got to do what God wants you to do, period. And that's all there is to it. And that you actually want to do that, even though there are so many impediments that stop us from doing what we actually want to do. Salvation is of the Lord. And his salvation is sometimes painful. And if you don't get that, then you're not paying attention. Because we have to be tried in the fire. A man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. Messiah. and others of his family are going to be the same. And if you think you're not going to have some issues and persecution and sacrifice and trouble of all kinds that you have to walk through with your faith glowing like Jonah did, and like the Messiah did, and like Peter did, then you're not paying attention. Peter got a little further in the process and did better than when he first walked on the water. Verse 10, and the Lord spoke unto the fish and had vomited Jonah out upon the dry land. God spoke to the fish, and the fish is like, all right, fine, I'll erp him up. It wasn't reluctant. But anybody that asks you to vomit intentionally, there's bound to be a moment, I don't care who you are, where you're like, do I really have to do that? Now, there's a thing that most people don't understand about this, and they don't really focus on it. But when you've been in the digestive juices of a whale for 3 days and 3 nights, there are going to be some consequences for that. And in history, we've found that several other people have been swallowed by whales. Nobody for 3 days and 3 nights that I'm aware of. But there was a guy that was in there for a day and a half that they managed to get back alive in the 1800s in a whaler. Not sure what kind of whale. I didn't focus on it. I didn't care. But what happens is that all that acid pretty much destroys lots of things in your skin. It destroys all the hair follicles, and it destroys all the pigments, and you end up coming out of it bald as an egg and white as skin can possibly be. Kind of interesting. And the people that God describes as coming out of the beast after 42 months of being digested in the belly of the beast. How are they described? Bald and blackened. It's a rough ride. It's a rough ride. Jonah 3 and verse 1. And the word of the Lord came unto me, saying, unto Jonah the second time, saying, arise and go to Nineveh, that great city, and preach unto it the preaching that I bid you. And Jonah didn't have any problem with that at this point. He's like, I don't want to be digested anymore. I don't want to be digested anymore. I'll go. Jonah arose and went unto Nineveh according to the word of the Lord. Now Nineveh was an exceeding great city of 3 days' journey. So Jonah just was like, okay, yes, Lord, please don't put me in the belly of a whale anymore. Jonah learned his lesson. And he rose and went. Now Nineveh was an exceeding great city of 3 days' journey. And we don't understand in our time and in our age how cities were back then. And we think that they were a lot lower population than what they actually were. So, you ask a modern day archaeologist how big the city of Nineveh was, and you're going to get an answer. Well, it was about, and I don't remember the actual, I at one point I knew how far it was. It was, maybe 3 or 4 miles across or something like that. That was not 3 days' journey. Cities back then were different than what archaeologists think. And the stone parts of the city were relatively small, but there were tent cities around most of these cities that were enormous. There were junkyards of things and people, just like you would see if you went to, Bolivia or somewhere, La Paz, and you see the city in the middle, and then there's all these junk cities all the way around. And it was like that on a scale that we don't really understand. When God says it was 3 days' journey to get across the city, it was. And it wasn't necessarily easy. You had to stop and go, and the traffic was horrible. And, there was a donkey pooping on your shoe constantly. And it was not, there were narrow streets, tiny little streets. And it wasn't a quick journey. You weren't going across one of these big cities back in Mesopotamia very quickly. Just wasn't happening. But it was also a lot bigger than we think it was. There were a lot more people running around than we think. So, that being said, verse 4, and Jonah began to enter into the city a day's journey, and he cried and said, Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown. And if your brain is functional, you're scratching your head right now, or you should be thinking about it seriously. Because so the people of Nineveh believed God and proclaimed a fast and put on sackcloth, from the greatest of them even to the least of them. When did that ever happen? When did that ever happen? When a prophet spoke. This is the only account anywhere in the entire Bible of anything of this nature happening, ever. You put some sackcloth and ashes on and go into any city in this world, anywhere, and say something like that and see what the reaction is. It won't be this reaction. I promise you, it won't be this reaction. I don't care what you do, it's not going to be this reaction. People will look at you like you're an idiot. People will scorn you, they will mock you, they will do all kinds of things, but they won't believe you. Why did they believe Jonah? Because God set them up to believe Jonah. Who were the prophets of Nineveh? They were these weird guys that went around shaving their heads all the time and putting all this white paint all over them because they looked ghostly or whatever, ghastly, when they were white and hairless. And Jonah was bald and naked as an egg, and he didn't have a single piece of whisker growing anywhere. He didn't have any 5 o'clock shadow. He was a natural to be one of their priests because he was white as an egg and bald as an egg. And everybody could tell that he wasn't putting any paint on. He didn't have any whiskers. And he came from some strange place, potentially speaking an entirely different language, although it's possible that he was able to be understood. Certainly had an accent. And everybody's like, whoa, he's the real deal. Whoa, he's the real deal. Look at him. Their priests went and looked at Jonah. The governors, the rulers of the city went and looked at Jonah. They all looked at him and they're like, wow, he's the real deal. He's bald and white as an egg. And that was why they believed. For the word came unto the king of Nineveh, and he rose from his throne and laid his robe from him and covered himself with sackcloth and sat in ashes. And he caused it to be proclaimed and published through Nineveh by a decree of the king and his nobles, saying, Let neither man nor beast, herd nor flock taste anything. Let them not feed nor drink water, but let man and beast be covered with sackcloth and cry mightily unto God. Yea, let them turn every one from his evil way, from the violence that is in their hands. Wow. Huh. Were they truly praying to the correct God? I tend to doubt it. But they had some pretty good ideas about what they should do. Turn from their evil way. They knew what the evil was. They knew what their evil was. And that God didn't like violence. This is a city in Babylon, for crying out loud, perhaps the capital at that point. Maybe Assyrian, I can't remember. At that point, it varied dramatically, depending upon when you were. But they knew what evil was. Did they know God's law perfectly? Probably not. But they knew enough to know what God liked and what he didn't like. Way better than we do in the end time, by far. Did they know that Jonah was an Israelite and he'd come to prophesy to them? Maybe. Probably. In which case they had a much better idea of what the laws and rules of Israel were, because they all knew what that was all about. They knew how the Israelites were different. Were they really truly praying to the correct God? Maybe. It seems to indicate that based upon the language, but they were still looking at a prophet who was bald as an egg and white. Yea, let them turn every one from his evil way and from the violence that is in their hands. Who can tell if God will turn and repent and turn away from his fierce anger that we perish not? And if you look at that verse right there, and then you go back in the Old Testament and you look at some of the things that Moses said, some of the things that other people said, it is so much like this that you just can't quite believe it. And this was the king of Nineveh. Sometimes we view things in the past in the wrong light. And God saw their works, that they turned from their evil way, and God repented of the evil that he had said that he would do unto them, and he did it not. Wow. When did that ever happen in Israel? But it displeased Jonah exceedingly, and he was very angry. And again, Jonah's attitude comes out. Why is Jonah pissed? Why is Jonah pissed? Well, it's quite easy, actually. He just saved the people that were going to destroy Israel. He knew the prophecies, he knew what was going on. He just saved the people who were going to destroy Israel. And he didn't like that. And he prayed unto the Lord and said, I pray you, O Lord, was not this my saying when I was yet in my country? Therefore I fled before unto Tarshish. For I knew that you are a gracious God and merciful and slow to anger and of great kindness, and repent you of the evil. You're such a nice guy. I didn't want to come and see these guys. Now we find out in retrospect that he had said this before. I really didn't want you to fix these guys. I wanted you to get rid of them. Therefore now, O Lord, take, I beseech you, my life from me, for it is better for me to die than to live. And if you're not understanding what's going on here, Jonah's like, hey, I did what I was supposed to. I came and did this, and da-da-da, now my life can go on and I can do great things or whatever. And yet Jonah sorrowfully is like, no, it's better I die than to live. I saved all these people, and it's better if you just kill me. We don't get the logic if we look at it on the surface. But Jonah knew. Jonah knew that God's people were going to be destroyed by the Ninevites. Historically, whether it's part of Babylon or whatever, I should have studied up on the actual timing of it, but it doesn't make any difference. Jonah knew that God was going to use these people to destroy Israel. Then said the Lord, you do well to be angry. Are you right about this? Are you certain you got the right attitude? So Jonah went out of the city in a snit and sat on the east side of the city, and there made him a booth. And he got some brush and made himself a little wickiup, and sat under it in the shadow till he might see what would become of the city. So let's sit here for a month and a bit and see what happens. And the Lord God prepared a gourd and made it come up over Jonah, that it might be a shadow over his head to deliver him from his grief. And I don't know how many people have made a hut out of sticks before, but not terribly excessively wonderful at blocking out the sun. Not unless you got a dense, thick forest around you, and it wasn't really like that around there. So God prepared a gourd, and if anybody knows what a gourd is, it's like, pumpkin, or most of the melons grow with a vine like gourds do. Some of the gourds are lighter, not as stickery or whatever, um, but it grew up fast, and it covered his little Sukkot, if you will. So Jonah was exceedingly glad of the gourd. But God also prepared a worm when the morning sun rose the next day. The morning rose the next day. The morning sun rose the next day, and it smote the gourd that it withered. And when plants die and wither, they get a lot smaller really quick. They don't really do much in the way of shade after that. And it came to pass, when the sun did arise, that God prepared a vehement east wind, and the sun beat upon the head of Jonah, that he fainted and wished in himself to die, and said, "It is better for me to die than to live. I saved these people who are going to destroy us." And because what prophet doesn't want to destroy the people that are going to destroy his own people? I mean, it's one of the things prophets do, is defend their own people, even though that's usually pretty limited in scope, because God's usually trying to kill his own people at this point. It's better for me to die than to live. And God said unto Jonah, do you well to be angry for the gourd? He said, I do well to be angry, even unto death. Then said the Lord, you have had pity on the gourd, for the which you had not labored, neither made it to grow, which came up in a night and perished in a night. And should I not spare Nineveh, that great city, wherein there are more than 6,000 persons that cannot be discerned between their right hand and their left hand, and also much cattle? So God's argument here is really logical and kind of difficult for anybody to deny. Why is this so difficult? Should I not spare Nineveh, that great city, wherein there are more than 6,000 people? 60,000 people that cannot discern between their right hand and their left hand. What does that mean? How many people are confused about their right hand or their left hand? Raise your right hand. Everybody's going to raise their right hand. Except whom? Children. There were 60,000 children in that city that still hadn't figured out which hand they should raise when somebody says, raise your right hand. If there were a few old people that couldn't figure that out either. Basically, God's saying, hey, you want me to kill 60,000 kids just because you're in a snit? Puts a little perspective into it. And also much livestock. There's a lot of animals. Animals don't really count for much, except that they do count for something, and God does care about animals. You can see it right there. Should I kill all these animals just because you're in a snit? Should I kill 60,000 children and all of everybody else just because you're pissy? Jonah's like, whew, that hurts. That hurts. And that's it. That's all we get. He go on to Micah. Jonah didn't get to reply to that. We don't have any record of what Jonah said after that. Do we need to have any record of it? No, not really. But what we do need to know is that faith is the only way out of these things. Faith and belief and works of faith, behavior reflecting your faith. That's the only way out of this. In the destruction of America, and in the beast running the whole world as the totalitarian dictator of the entire world for 42 months. How do you get through that? It's pretty easy. You have to not value your own life beyond what you should. You should not try to save your own life. You should dedicate it to God. And if death comes, then death comes, and you will be a sacrifice. But if you seek to save your own life, you're going to lose it. And if you seek to lose your own life for God's sake, then you shall save it. Like Jonah, not caring whether they threw him out of the boat or not. Walking in faith, doing the best thing they can, but try not to be in a snit. An evil and adulterous generation seeks after a sign, and there shall be no sign given to it but the sign of Jonah the prophet. Matthew 12:39. And just like the Messiah, when he said, not one stone should be left upon another that shall not be thrown down, God's church is going to be the same. And the outer court, which is part of God's church, part of the temple, which is God's church, they're going to be pitched like a ball into other countries where they will serve as slaves for 42 months in the belly of the beast. And if you don't believe this, fine, don't. You may or may not be alive to experience it. But here's the catch. To be a part of this group of people that are thrown violently into these other countries as slaves, you have to do something to get to that point. You have to do something so that God will save you, just like he did Jonah. What do you have to do? You have to admit your sin. Regardless of anything else, you have to admit your sin. And if you admit your sin, you admit that God's law exists and will exist, and not one jot or one tittle will change in it until everything is finished. You have to admit that the law exists and that sin exists and that you have it, and thus you can repent, be baptized, and that the blood of Christ will cover you. But if you don't admit your sin, and you're one of those people that denies the law, if there's no law, there's no sin. And if there's no sin, there's no repentance. And if there's no repentance, there's no baptism or sacrifice. You see, Christ came to call sinners to repentance, not the righteous. Righteous have no need to repent of anything, do they? You have to admit your sin, or you're not going to get taken into another country and become a slave for 3 days and 3 nights, like Jonah did. Three years, but this circumstance is very serious, because this is the bar, the low bar the lowest bar of the outer court of God's church, God's temple. You either admit your sin, and when the armies of the beast come into this country, which they're going to do, certainly, read Joel. Joel's all about that. If you don't bow down on your knees, when they come into this country, they will kill you. When you run into these people from all the nations of the earth that are going to destroy Babylon and sack it completely, destroy America from beginning to end, if you're not on your knees, bowing your head when these people come in, you're just going to die. That's what the sign of Jonah is all about. You see, these people who actually admit their sin, they've decided not to be hypocrites. They've decided that they will follow God and they will do what they're supposed to do. And by the time those 42 months end, they will sweetly obey God and follow him wherever he goes, whatever he does. They'll be like, "Yay, Lord, let's go. Let's head off to Nineveh or wherever." Really, it's Jerusalem. Oh, you want us to come back to Jerusalem? Let's go. Yay. We get to go back to Jerusalem. God will send fishers and hunters to find them, bring them from the four corners of the wind. This is when the beginning of the third kingdom happens. It's big. It's important. It's really cool. Are there other people that are more faithful than these guys? Yeah, there are. But these guys are faithful and are a type in their way of Jonah, which Jonah is a type of the Messiah. All the prophets were and are types of the Messiah. This is important that we understand. Important to a lot of people that we understand and are ready when the time comes to at least bow our knees before God's servant, who is the beast, who God sends here to destroy America, whether we like it or not. Who would like the destruction of America? It's not something you just like. If you do, then you're kind of sadistic in some way or another. It's not something we just like on its surface. Who wants to see 300 million people die? Won't be all that many, but who wants to see that? And yet it is the vengeance of God. It is the vengeance of his temple. And it is a good work of God. It's not our job to shoot people in America. It's not our job to kill people or do anything. We're supposed to be wise as serpents, harmless as doves. But God's more than capable of rounding up the beast and every one of his cronies to send here to destroy anyone who won't obey him. You see, this is the end. Read Ezekiel 7. It's the end. An end is come upon my people. I shall pass by them no more. Whether it's Amos or Ezekiel, the idea is the same. And if you don't get it, you're not going to be one of those wise that understands. There's more to this than what I'm going to say. There's a lot more to this than what I'm going to say. There's some other things that are really important, but I'm not going to say them because it's not time for that yet. But we need to be paying attention. Verse 41, the men of Nineveh shall rise in judgment with this generation and shall condemn it, because they repented at the preaching of Jonah, and behold, a greater than Jonah is here. Matthew 12:41. What are we talking about all of a sudden? We know what the sign of Jonah is. We figured all that out between 38 and 40. And yet suddenly we're talking about the men of Nineveh rising up in judgment against this generation, against God's people in this generation, against the church of God and the temple of God. Them saying, well, we did better than they did. We're suddenly in the judgment. And God's telling us one of his judgments. He's saying Nineveh was way better than my people in this end time. Way better. They had faith and believed that I was going to do what I said I was going to do. And they're right in saying that they did better than you are. You. Huh. Wow. Is this generation that bad? Yeah, it is. All the tables are full of vomit. There is no place clean. Well, how can this be the big harvest of the whole earth? Because the end of the world is the harvest of the whole earth. It's because God has done this work in this way. And there are a lot of people on this planet now, not nearly as many as there used to be. And he's had a plan all the way along to do this. And this generation is pretty large. A lot of those people are going to die because they're wicked and sinful and sexually immoral. God's going to kill them. The queen of the south, verse 42, shall rise up in judgment with this generation and shall condemn it. For she came from the uttermost parts of the earth to hear the wisdom of Solomon. And behold, a greater than Solomon is here. Who's so much greater than Solomon or Jonah? Of course, the Messiah. Why is he juxtaposing himself in the middle of this? Part of it is just that when is his revelation? When is the revelation of Jesus Christ? Haven't I read that book? Yeah. The revelation of Jesus Christ is when he is revealed to the whole world. And that's pertinent to what we're talking about right here. It's pertinent to the judgment. It's pertinent to God's judgment of our circumstance and what he's going to do in the end time. He's got justification for killing most of the world, which you can read in Revelation. If you're paying attention at all, you realize that when all this is done, there's not going to be many men left on the whole planet. If you don't get that, then you haven't been paying attention. The end of the world is the harvest. The harvest is the end of the world, where God cuts everything off at the roots and separates the good from the bad, burns the bad, and saves the good. Whether they be alive or dead makes very little difference. Everybody's getting cut off because it's the end. What happens at the end? You stop things. This isn't New Testament times. This isn't Mosaic times. It's the end. And you better engage your faith and your belief and understand what you're dealing with, or there'll be weeping and gnashing of teeth. and you won't like it much. And then suddenly we go to this other place with this unclean spirit. Huh. You know what? This isn't a change of context. It might feel like it because, well, you can find this in Luke, and you sort of doesn't, everything else doesn't jibe up exactly, but guess what? There's no context change here. It may seem like it, but there's not. Not really. Story changes a little bit. The context really doesn't. When the unclean spirit, verse 43, is gone out of a man, and he walks through dry places seeking rest and finds none. Then says he, I will return into my house from whence I came out, and when he has come, he finds it empty and swept and garnished. Yeah, they cleaned it all up for me. Thanks. Then goes he and takes with himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of the man is worse than the first. Even so shall it be unto this wicked generation, unto this sinful generation. Wow, why is he saying that? Most people don't even understand what these 3 verses mean. The bigger picture here is you only get so many chances. He's only going to clean you up so many times before the end comes and the destruction has to come. And if you manage to get out from under the evil of possession, as the example in this circumstance, you better clean up your house and fix everything in such a way that you don't have more demons enter. You better get rid of the sin. You better clean the inside of the cup for real, not just rearrange a little bit. Because see, if you just rearrange a little bit and you let the demons and the demonology back in, there's a limit. There's a limit to how often that's going to happen before God just destroys you. It's kind of painful. Most people will be like, oh, God is love. He'd never do that. Really? Is that the best you can come up with? God is love, and he will do that if it's the only thing that you will do to follow him. He's done this whole thing from back Adam and Eve all the way through till now. He's proven to you that he is faithful and that he will do as he has said. He's destroyed his own temple twice. Fully, the whole temple, everything. And he's destroyed a lot of other places. Bethel and a variety of different places, more than once where his name was. He's destroyed his own people many times before. He's not opposed to destroying his own people if they won't follow him, because they're not his people if they won't follow him, regardless of whether they were grafted in or not grafted in, regardless of whether they're heathen or not heathen, Israelites or not Israelites. If you've managed to become one of God's people in some fashion, you better hold on to it tight and right and let go of the evil and actually know who he is and not have one of 100,000 different doctrines. Millions of doctrines, 100,000 different churches with millions of doctrines, all awry and all not of God. Some of them are right. Most of them are wrong. Do you really know who God is? To say that God's going to give people multiple chances over and over and over and just keep. Oh, God will show us a sign. He'll show us a sign. There'll be signs and wonders. We're going to see them. They're all around us. We just aren't interpreting them correctly. No, okay. Obviously part of that wicked and adulterous generation. God's not going to put up with this for very much longer. He's not going to put up with it for very much longer. He's angry. He's absolutely pissed that we haven't learned any of the lessons we were supposed to learn, either from the Old Testament or the New Covenant, the New Testament times. All we've done is run around trying to prove that God didn't mean what he actually said he was going to, what he meant. We created seminaries that just turn out these people that they're not just ignorant of who God is. They're actively seeking to derail people from God, whether they know it or not. Blind leaders of the blind. Worst education you could possibly get about God is at a seminary. You could get no worse than that. We're so full, chock full of seminary-led garbage that it just, ugh, I want to vomit. Oh, we're teaching you the principles of how God is or something. Principles of how to read the Bible to get whatever you want out of it is pretty much what you learn at a seminary. You don't have to work at it real hard to even think about that. All you have to do is look around and say, well, what are the fruits of this? And boy, howdy, there are a lot of evil fruits. And if you have this particular sin, there's a way out of it. There's a way out of it. It's not comfortable. It's not pleasant. But if you want God to say, you good and faithful servant, and you're stuck in this sin of Balaam and a whole bunch of other garbage, false prophecy and whatnot, your pride's going to suffer a little during this process. You're going to have to read the parable of the unrighteous steward and allow yourself to understand that it applies to you completely. And if you're not involved in that, then you need to stop believing the garbage that a lot of these guys are teaching. Because it's garbage, it's false hope, false prophecy of the worst sort. You have to make a choice. You have to make a choice. You see that's what prophets do, is they give people choices. You can believe me in faith or not. Live or die. It's up to you. But this is your sin, and this is your problem. And you better fix it, or God will kill you. This is what prophets do. And you should know that. It's what Jeremiah did. It's what Isaiah did. It's what Ezekiel did. It's what Jonah did. Amos, Obadiah, choose one. They all did the same thing. Elisha, the Messiah himself. John, all the apostles. Paul, choose therefore life or death, blessing or cursing. Whether it's from the Old Testament or the New Testament, doesn't make any difference. Same basic idea all the way through. And if you don't get that God's doing something in the end time, you're going to be in trouble. He's let us sit here and play with our thumbs, twiddle, for the last 2,000 years because he was waiting for us to ripen. He gave us all this time for us to inculcate everything that he taught us. And now it remains for this last generation to choose who they're going to be before he destroys everything. So make your choice. You don't have long.